The first time I realized my parents were serious, it wasn't in court. It was at my office. I was finishing a late meeting when my assistant hesitated at the door, holding her tablet like it weighed more than usual. "Lila," she said carefully, "there's a legal notice addressed to you." It was delivered twice. Twice meant urgency. I opened the file standing up. Petition to claim assets. Claim. Not borrow. Not manage. Claim. My parents were listed as petitioners. The amount was typed neatly in bold, $3.9 million. My savings. The accumulation of a decade of disciplined work, deferred comfort, and strategic risk. The reason stated below made my stomach tighten. To provide financial stability to their other daughter. My sister. I sat down slowly. Growing up, I was the easy child. The one who didn't ask for much. The one who figured things out quietly. The one who didn't need rescuing. My sister needed rescuing often. And loudly. She moved from opportunity to opportunity, always just one step away from getting it right, always supported by our parents' belief that if they just helped a little more, things would finally stabilize. That little more never came from them. It came from me. At first, it was small. Covering a bill. A temporary loan. Paying something off to keep the peace. I never complained. I never tracked it. I believed family meant stepping in when things tilted. I stopped stepping in years ago. They never stopped expecting it. My career had taken a different path. I didn't announce promotions. I didn't post achievements. I worked in a space where discretion mattered, where money moved quietly and records mattered more than recognition. I built my savings carefully, cleanly. Every dollar documented, every account structured for one purpose: independence. Not luxury. Security. I never imagined my parents would try to convert that into obligation. Until they did. The summons came 2 weeks later. Formal. Precise. Inescapable. My parents didn't call beforehand. They didn't warn me. They let the paperwork speak for them. That hurt more than the numbers. I hired a lawyer the same day. He was thorough, unflappable, and uninterested in family dynamics. "On what basis are they claiming your assets?" he asked. "Family responsibility," I replied. He nodded slowly. "That's not a legal basis. They're framing it as fairness." He leaned back. "Fairness is a feeling. Ownership is fact." That sentence steadied me. The day of the hearing, my parents sat together, hands clasped, faces set in quiet determination. My sister sat behind them, eyes darting, confidence brittle. They didn't look at me. Not once. Their attorney spoke first, painting a picture of imbalance. Of one daughter with abundance and another on the edge. Of parents trying to correct what life had unfairly distributed. They used words like equitable and reasonable. They never used mine. When it was my lawyer's turn, he stood calmly. "Before we discuss any transfer," he said, "there's a foundational issue." The judge looked up. "Which is?" "Authority," he replied. "Specifically, the lack of it." My parents' attorney objected immediately, but the judge waved him down. "Proceed." My lawyer opened a folder and placed a document on the bench. Not dramatic. Not rushed. Just precise. "This is a deed," he said. "Filed years ago. Legally recorded." My mother frowned. My father shifted. The judge examined the document carefully. "What does this have to do with the savings in question?" she asked. My lawyer met her gaze. "Everything. The funds my client accumulated were derived from assets tied directly to this deed." The room went very quiet. My sister leaned forward, confused. My father whispered, "What is that?" I didn't answer. I remembered the moment now. Years ago, during a visit that felt ordinary at the time, my grandmother had asked me to sign something. She said it was for protection. She'd been methodical, careful with words, always thinking 3 steps ahead. I'd trusted her. I hadn't understood how much. My parents' attorney scrambled. "That property is irrelevant," he argued. "The petition concerns liquid savings." My lawyer didn't raise his voice. "Savings sourced from assets owned exclusively by my client." The judge's eyes sharpened. "So," she said slowly, "you're requesting a transfer of funds built on property you don't own." My mother's face drained of color. My father's jaw tightened. The judge set the document down. "We'll take a brief recess," she said. But the decision had already formed. As we stood, my mother finally looked at me. "You could have told us," she said quietly. I met her eyes. "You could have asked," I replied. When the court reconvened, the air felt heavier. Not tense. Exposed. The judge returned, adjusted her glasses, and looked directly at my parents. There was no irritation in her expression, only patience thinning into precision. "Counsel," she said to their attorney, "explain why this court should compel a transfer of assets when ownership is not in dispute." Their lawyer stood, smoothed his jacket, and tried again. "Your Honor, we're not disputing ownership of the property. We're arguing intent. Family intent." The judge tilted her head slightly. "Intent does not override title." My father leaned forward then, voice strained. "We were only trying to balance things. One child has more. One has less." The judge looked at him evenly. "That is not the role of the court." I felt something loosen in my chest. For years, my parents had spoken as if balance were something they could impose, something they could take from one child to stabilize another. Hearing that logic stripped of authority was quietly validating. My lawyer stood again. "Your Honor, there's another point the petition overlooks." The judge nodded. "Go on." "The funds in question were accumulated through income streams directly tied to the deed you've reviewed," he said. "Which means any forced transfer would constitute an unlawful seizure." My sister's head snapped up. "That's not fair," she blurted out. The judge's gaze shifted. "You are not a party to speak," she said calmly. My sister sank back, cheeks flushed. My mother reached for my father's hand. "Your Honor," she said softly, "we didn't know." The judge's response was immediate. "Ignorance does not create entitlement." Silence followed. Heavy. Final. The ruling came quickly. The petition was dismissed in full. No partial claims. No reconsideration. No conditions. The judge closed the file and looked up one last time. "This court will not be used to redistribute assets based on family preference," she said. Case closed. The sound of the gavel was quiet. But the meaning wasn't. Outside the courtroom, everything unraveled at once. My sister turned on me immediately. "You planned this." "No," I replied. "I prepared." "That's the same thing," she snapped. "It isn't," I said. "Planning is against someone. Preparation is for yourself." My father stepped between us. "Enough." He looked at me, eyes searching, uncertain. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" "I did," I replied. "You just didn't hear it as important." My mother wiped her eyes. "We never thought you'd protect yourself from us." I didn't answer. There was no version of that sentence that didn't explain itself. In the days that followed, the calls came. From relatives who had questions. From friends who had opinions. From my parents, who had distance. No one apologized outright. No one accused me either. They were recalibrating, figuring out how to speak to someone who no longer fit the role they'd assigned her. My sister tried one last angle. She came to my office unannounced. Security called to ask if I knew her. "Yes," I said. "Send her up." She walked in like she owned the space, then faltered when she saw it: glass walls, quiet efficiency, people who didn't know her story. "You really live like this?" she asked. "I work like this," I replied. She crossed her arms. "You could still help me." "I already have," I said. "By saying no." Her laugh was sharp. "You think this is over?" I met her eyes. "For me, it is." She left without another word. That night, I reviewed my accounts again. Everything was intact. Not just the money, the boundaries. I thought of my grandmother then. Of her quiet foresight. Of how she'd protected me without spectacle, without announcements. She'd known something my parents hadn't. That the most dangerous assumption is believing access will always be granted. I slept deeply for the first time since the summons arrived. Because the court hadn't just ruled on money. It had clarified something far more important. My life wasn't a shared resource. The fallout didn't come loudly. It came in adjustments. Family dinners stopped, including financial discussions. Conversations avoided anything that sounded like expectation. When my name came up, It was followed by pauses, measured, careful, unfamiliar. They were learning where the line was. And that line held. My parents didn't call for a while after the ruling. Not out of anger, but confusion. They had built their understanding of family around access. Who could step in, who could step up, who could be leaned on without asking. That model no longer worked. When my father finally reached out, his message was short. "Can we talk?" We met at a quiet place, neutral ground again. He arrived early, hands folded, posture reserved. He looked like someone who had rehearsed a speech and abandoned it halfway through. "I didn't think it would go this far," he said. "It only went as far as it had to," I replied. He nodded slowly. "We raised you to be responsible." "Yes," I said. "Not disposable." That landed harder than I intended. He didn't flinch, but he didn't disagree either. "We were afraid," he admitted. "Afraid your sister would never land on her feet." "And you decided my footing was optional," I replied. He closed his eyes briefly. "We didn't see it that way." "I know," I said. "That's why it happened." He looked up. "You don't owe us anything." The words sounded new to him. "They shouldn't," I said gently. He nodded again. That was the end of it. No apology. No justification. Just acceptance. My mother came around later. Her message was longer. Softer. She talked about regret without naming it. About wishing she'd asked questions sooner. About not realizing how much pressure silence could carry. I listened. I didn't rush to repair anything. Some things don't need fixing. They need redefining. "I don't want distance," she said finally. "I don't want control," I replied. We found something workable in between. My sister didn't reach out again. She didn't need to. Her world had narrowed, not because I pushed her out, but because the safety net she'd assumed would always catch her was no longer there. She adjusted. Or didn't. That wasn't mine to manage anymore. Months passed. Life returned to a rhythm that felt earned. At work, nothing changed, except my focus. Without the background tension of expectation, I made decisions faster. I slept better. I stopped bracing for emergencies that weren't mine to solve. One afternoon, while organizing files, I found the copy of the document again, the one they'd missed. The deed. Still quiet. Still precise. Still doing its job. I thought of my grandmother then, not with gratitude that felt loud, but with respect that felt steady. She'd known the difference between love and protection. She'd given me both, without making either conditional. That understanding shaped everything. At the next family gathering, something subtle happened. When someone mentioned finances casually, my father changed the subject. When someone tried to ask me a pointed question, my mother redirected. No one asked what I could contribute. They asked how I was. That was new. And enough. Looking back, I don't see the court case as a victory. I see it as a correction. A moment where assumptions met structure. Where entitlement met record. Where expectation met law. My parents tried to claim what they believed was available. They didn't account for what had already been secured. And when the document surfaced, it didn't just end a case. It ended a pattern. I didn't walk away richer. I walked away clearer. Clear about my boundaries. Clear about my role. Clear about what family is and what it isn't. And that clarity was worth more than the $3.9 million they thought they could take.